So I doubled what I was getting out of my crop, and all I did was change packaging, and it actually made my customers happier. The 2 container sizes, yeah. So this is from the course, was what Lou Callahan had recommended, and it actually worked well. They said to do 2 ounces in these trays, or in these containers. And these containers were fine. They had lids, but they were like 75 bucks for 200. And then the lids would fall off all the time. It's all recycled plastic. It's not bad. I think we use them mainly now for seeds. I did end up using most of them because I'd forget to get them. And then these are from the restaurant store. And this is because of me talking to Ray Tyler and what he uses for his salad mix for when he sells to restaurants. And I said, well, let's see what they have for microgreens. And this is actually the 3rd style that I use, and this is the one I like. So one thing that I noticed being here in the Midwest, like microgreens, like chefs are aware of them, but a lot of consumers have no idea what they are unless they're hipster foodies like me. And so a lot of times when I'm at a farmer's market, I'm a little guy, so there's 2 major farmers markets, and I'm not on that waiting list or anything. Like, it's hard for me to get into them. So I had to go and find other farmers markets, and a lot of places where I'd go, people weren't hip to microgreens. So I would have to do a lot of education, and I'd have to do a lot of explaining about what microgreens were. So one thing that I noticed with that was people didn't like the 2 ounces because they would say, oh, I still have some, or oh, I think it's going to go to waste. So I thought, instead of changing my pricing, why don't I just change the packaging to something that I like and then put less in it? And by doing that, I'm actually going to make more money, and then the customers are actually going to be happier with what they get. So I went to the smallest container that they have at the restaurant store, and it fits. I put an ounce of everything in except for cilantro. If I have anything left over, I'd sell that at ½ ounce, because it's something that it's pretty dainty. So you can actually ½ ounce of cilantro is about the same as an ounce of this, of how much you actually get. So instead of making 20 bucks a pound at a farmer's market with the conservatively with the 1 for 3 or 2 for 5 model, I'm making about 40. So I doubled what I was getting out of my crop, and all I did was change packaging, and it actually made my customers happier. So it was just mainly paying attention to people buying, looking at their faces when I'm trying to sell them, and figure out, okay, why don't they want these microgreens? And then what the cool thing though was rewarding was then I had people coming back. They would try them, and I'd say, well, what do I do with them? How do I eat them? I'm like, well, I like these with eggs and sandwiches. Cilantro, I think micro cilantro you can pretty much replace cilantro with. It's really it's a crop that everybody pretty much loves if cilantro doesn't taste like soap to them. And I let the true leaf get. This is getting a little bit bigger, but squirrels actually got into this, and because we had that open over there, and squirrels came in, and so we have a squirrel. We got to set a squirrel trap, but it's one of the. That's kind of funny. It's one of the costs of wanting to grow these crops outside.
Do you have any issues with the seed hulls coming off on cilantro?
So that's funny, man. So the chefs like them. So that's like the one thing where they actually really like the seeds being on there. And so I use I get it from Kitswana, and I get I forget the kind. I can get the information to you, but John Dowie told me about it, the cilantro he used, and he said it's not the double, it's a single. And actually, when you open up the seeds smell like Fruity Pebbles. It's pretty interesting, but no. So the seeds, that's actually a thing where the chefs and everybody likes the seed. They like the look of it. They like the way it looks on the plant itself. It adds, I guess, it adds some aesthetic. It has some aesthetic value that I didn't even think they would like. So
here's the 2 different styles containers that Drew mentioned that he's using. So 2 different sizes, and this is something that's interesting. Sometimes you sell a product and you realize it's not going so well. Well, what if you just change the look of how you're presenting that product, how you're packaging the product? It's not all about the product itself that might not be working. It could be price, it could be presentation, it could be what you're actually containing that product in to sell it to the customer. So changing things up can make a big difference. These 2 containers have made a big difference for Drew.
These are the containers I use. So I actually stole this from the local mentor. These are like, if you get them on sale, they're 88 cents from Target. I put a paper towel in because it actually lasts a lot longer. And a lot of restaurants, they just keep my containers. Some of them, they'll keep my paper towels. But one thing that having Rich around, like one of the things I was doing before he got here was I would take this knife, because I asked Curtis and Luke, and they're like, just get a chef's knife and do it. And I would just kind of cut and sloppily throw it in a container. But something that I noticed with Rich, well, one thing is we started using this knife. I think he got it off Amazon. I like this one a lot better. It's a little bit longer of a blade, and then I can just kind of balance it on the tray.
Some people might be asking, where did Drew get this knife? It's available on Amazon. I'll put a link to that below. They're made in Sweden. The name's hard to pronounce. I cannot pronounce it. But here's a picture of that knife. And if you're interested, the link is below. But it's a longer, kind of thinner knife, kind of fillet knife style that is good for harvesting microgreens. At least Drew thinks it is, and it's worked well for him.
The thing I like, though, that's something that Rich would always harp on me, because he is like such a plant guy. It was like, hey, this stuff's alive. What are you doing? And I would just be like, good enough, good enough, good enough. And then when he started harvesting, he goes, wouldn't it look better if you did it like this? And so, you know, instead of me just cutting a big chunk and then throwing it in, like I gently set it in and I try to stack it in neatly. And it all goes with presentation. So I mean, so if I don't necessarily have a consistent, yeah, so it looks all right. It looks better when it gets to the end. But so if I'm not necessarily going to have like if I know that there could be some potential problems with consistency, I need to make sure I can get an edge wherever I can. So to me, it even went as far as presentation. So not only do I want my stuff to be superior in taste and flavor and looks, but I want the presentation to be superior. And that was something Rich kind of helped me with. And it was like, I was kind of on the fence about it. I'm like, well, Curtis said this, and that was in my head. And I've really, you know, Curtis Stone's been such a huge help for me. But then like I had a chef, when I immediately took something that Rich had packaged, and the chef looked at it and goes, see, even your presentation is great. And I was like, I guess I need to keep doing this. If they're gonna, if they liked it so much that they said something. And Rich has a huge history of working in a restaurant, and something he said to me was, and it was like the old school chefs when they were still jerks. And he was like, you know, if somebody brings me something, it looks like crap or their container's dirty, I'm not even gonna buy it. So it was, you know, people pay attention to things, and so that's the biggest thing. So one of the things with cilantro is, and this is something that you can kind of see here, is there's definitely spots where it still dies. And we're not sure what that is. Again, it's a trial and error thing. There's not a lot of instructions on how to grow this. Dowie's getting a pretty good yield. Dowie, I know he soaks this seed. We don't do that. I don't want to soak this seed. I'd prefer not to. It's kind of a finer seed. So we've messed a lot with seed density. And again, when the video in the basement where you see it open and sitting out there, we're trying to figure out the best way to do cilantro. So it's something that always sells. Like I had a chef that wanted a pound. I had multiple chefs that want pounds of it. But it's just it's tough to grow, and it's been really spotty, and it's a crop that we're still trying to solve the puzzle on. But I'm pretty happy. At the most, we've yielded about 8 ounces. It yields anywhere from about 4 to 8 ounces a tray. But a lot of it too is, you know, picking out. I mean, sometimes these seeds die, and you'll start to see just like some rot, or just something where a seed started to germinate or something. And I just don't even try to use it. I don't even want to mess with it. If it's anything that looks funky, I just get rid of it. I'm not hurting that bad. I'm not gonna. And also too, like I want my product to have a certain presentation when I'm going to a restaurant. Like I want them, like there's an expectation of how my stuff smells and tastes. I mean, Diego, you can probably smell the cilantro now just from me cutting it. Like it's a really great crop. I mean, the smell of it, the look of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, looking at this and smelling it, and it smells good. One thing I find really interesting is, you know, a lot of these chefs are really concerned with presentation of how they present their dishes. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times people aren't considering how they're presenting the raw ingredients to the chef, and I think there's a lot of value in doing it. And it's another way to stand out. It takes a little bit more time, a little bit more care.
Yeah.
But I like what you said. If they noticed it enough to say something, it was obviously important.
It's obviously important, and so Rich and I will have different battles amongst what's important and what's not important, and it's a constant fight. But the nice thing is, it's nice to have somebody else that cares, that we can have constructive disagreements. We can have constructive, heated arguments if we haven't been eating and it's incredibly hot outside. So, yeah, you know, but I mean, it's still a process, man. I mean, it's still improving. I definitely have room to improve. I mean, this is a bootstrap operation, or as Mike McCallitz would say, it's a toilet paper entrepreneur. I'd like to consider myself, which is a good book for people to check out. But yeah, I mean, so this is pretty simple. I mean, this stuff's all sold already. So once I harvest it and you take off, I'll take it straight to one of my restaurants, and they'll buy everything that I have. They would like to have a half pound, but they like my stuff so much better than their distributor that, like I said, it's not even a competition. They accidentally ordered it because they didn't know if I was going to have it, because I wasn't. I was still really. It was kind of one of those things that they asked me to grow it. They said, "Well, buy whatever you grow," and then they liked it so much that they gave me some referrals to other restaurants. But yeah, I mean, one time they had accidentally purchased the micro cilantro that gets from somewhere else, and it looked a lot more like this. They didn't like the true leaf. They actually really liked the true leaf, but it just didn't have that flavor. It tasted kind of bitter. I'm pretty sure they were growing it in either hydroponics or whatever, a non-soil medium, just because a lot of times the bigger distributors, they have such mass production. I don't think it's cost effective for them to use soil. So like I'm a huge advocate of soil. I think soil makes all the difference in the world. I think, you know, it's probably the hippie in me.
One thing I really like is things you can do in your business to give yourself an edge that don't cost any money or really much more time. It's the little things about just thinking about how you're doing them, the process involved, presentation, display. Here's one example of that. This is how Drew presents his crops when he sells them to a restaurant. They're all nicely lined up. That does a few things. You know, when the chef looks at it, they can see the product, they can appreciate it. They're visually oriented, they're gonna like that. It also makes it easy for the chef to take product out of here. These are in nice little rows, they're stacked in there so they can grab pinches of it if they need to. If you're just throwing stuff in, a lot of this stuff that's really fine, it can tend to get into like a gnarled spaghetti mess. And if the chef only wants this much, they might have to pull out a whole bunch to get it. And it also makes it easy for them to place this on a plate. If they want to put it down, you know, in a certain direction, everything's lined up the same way. It's not all twisted, and they're not having to spend extra time to do that. Whole key here is this is a free way to differentiate yourself, set yourself ahead of the competition, and just gain an edge in what can be a very competitive space. China rose radish, why do you like this one, and how do you find it goes over with chef customers?
So the stems, I mean, usually with chefs or anybody, like our eyes are drawn to color. And let me see if I can get some of that in there. I have some Sango too. The Sango is the purple radish. The leaves will be purple, which is really cool. But again, it was something I bought when I thought that we were going to be able to really market radish hard before we had to change everything up. So I have it. So I'll still need it. I just need to find a market for it. And then that's the nice thing about seed is it just sits there and I can use it. But what we did was we just reduced. We started growing this again, and I want the variety and color of stems. So for when I do sell it either at a farmer's market, or I do have a restaurant. She likes it when I throw the radish in with the mustard and arugula. She likes that variety of flavor. So I also wanted to have a variety of color for her, because I mean, anything to help chefs add more character to a plate, consumers are going to appreciate too. I mean, they're not as picky, but if a chef likes it, everybody's going to like it, in my opinion.
When it comes to a lot of these varieties and crops out there that you can grow in terms of microgreens, there's a whole lot of choices. Do you let chefs guide you in terms of what you grow, or do you find that chefs are pretty receptive where you can use your instincts and gut to grow something and then push it on to them and they'll take it? Or are you waiting for them to say, you know, I really wish you had a radish that had such and such characteristics and doing that?
So it's a mixture of both. Right now I have one chef that wants us to do basil, and he wants us to try and do dandelion microgreens. Thankfully I have Rich here, somebody to bounce stuff off, because if it was me, I would probably immediately try to do it, because I'm just like, let me give them what they need, because I'm very agreeable. But yeah, it's a mixture of everything. I mean, so with the one thing is that paying attention to what the chefs like. They like the color, they like the difference, and they like the contrast in color. So when I decided to get Triton seed as well, we had done China Rose when I first bought seed for microgreens, and it was great. It looks good. I like the color. It has good flavor. So to answer your question, it's a mixture of both. So you know, the arugula was something I came up with, and it was basically we had extra seed, and I was like, hey Rich, let's try and do arugula too, because I think it's going to be a nice contrast in this spicy mix. It's going to be a similar, I had suspicions that it would be a similar seed to mustard, because it's a similar size seed and they are in the same family, from my understanding. Am I right there?
Did you find any difference in how you grow the crop? So you can grow a radish with a shorter cycle versus a longer cycle, and the same variety, get a different flavor, get a different color, get a different texture?
Yeah, so radish, man, it's been tricky. So radish we can turn over in about 6 days. It grows really quick, even right now in the cold. I mean, I don't think this has been more than 7 or 8 days. The one thing that I notice is consumers don't mind if it gets too big. Sometimes the leaves get too big, and then it kind of takes away from restaurants. All my chefs like stuff really small. They're really picky. They like stuff really small, but I don't mind, because everybody else that's selling microgreens, their microgreens get quite a bit bigger. So it was kind of like, well, this is a spot I can get into. I might not yield as much, but I'm getting access to a different market that these chefs or these other farmers don't necessarily want to deal with. That's something I've noticed. I like this stuff personally smaller. I find it has better flavor when it's smaller. I like the way it looks a lot better personally. So when I'm selling it, to me, it's important that I like what I'm selling, that I like that's what's leaving the house. And I mean, you could ask Rich, there's certain times where I'm like, yeah, man, I let that radish go too long. That's just going to the farmer's market. Like I don't even want to try to sell that to a chef, because I'm not really comfortable taking that to a chef. And it goes back to with sunflower shoots, why we're not really doing it. We did our last batch, and they grew well, but they're just so dirty. And again, they don't have the same, they just don't have the same vibrancy when you look at them. It's not as colorful. It doesn't draw you like a mustard does, or like radish does, or even cilantro. Or even pea shoots. It's just, I think it's a great crop, and if we can figure out a way to make it cleaner, and that's just something that it's shelved for later on. We have a lot of products now that we still need to kind of really get a grasp of.
There you have it, an inside look at Drew Sample's microgreen operation that he has running here in Columbus, Ohio. This is Drew's second season doing microgreens here. A lot of trial and error, a lot of figuring stuff out, and I hope that translates well to people watching this. Like, you're not going to get it right all from the start. You're going to have to figure things out. In Drew's case, having a second set of eyes, like Rich, has really helped him out. So if you're stuck on stuff, you know, look for resources out there online or in your community. Find a mentor, somebody who can help guide you. And then sometimes you just got to go with something, start and do it, and then adjust accordingly. Don't be so quick to scrap things. Be afraid to try and do things in a different way. There can be a lot of options out there when it comes to this type of growing. Microgreens can be popular. They can be financially lucrative, but be aware there might be competition in your area, and try and find a way to make it work there if you do have that competition, and give yourself an edge. If you want to follow along what Drew's doing, he has a podcast. I'll link to that below. I've been on that podcast before. It's a good one. And then if you're looking for any other resources mentioned in this video, check out the links below. That's all for this one. Thanks for watching. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.